The year was 1939, and the rumblings of war in Europe had yet to fully echo across the Atlantic. But in the dimly lit, smoke-filled design offices of Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, a different kind of storm was brewing. Dr. Elias Thorne, a man whose spectacles perpetually slid down his nose and whose suits always seemed to be a size too large, was not one for consensus. His brilliance was undeniable. His methods, however, were often deemed, by his peers and superiors alike, as maddeningly circuitous. Bordering on the overcomplicated, Thorne had cut his teeth designing intricate hydraulic systems for industrial machinery before the allure of flight drew him to aerospace. He understood mechanical resilience, the beauty of redundancy, and the unforgiving nature of failure when a single point could unravel an entire system. These principles, he believed, were woefully undervalued in the nascent field of combat aircraft design, where speed and simplicity were often prioritized above all else. His colleagues at Grumman, famed for their ironworks philosophy, rugged, straightforward, and effective designs like the F-4F Wildcat, viewed Thorne's burgeoning torpedo bomber project with a mixture of awe and exasperation. The Navy's requirement for a new torpedo bomber was clear: capable of carrying a Mark 13 torpedo, long range, and robust enough to operate from aircraft carriers. Existing designs, while promising, often sacrificed protection for speed or payload for maneuverability. Thorne, however, envisioned a Leviathan, not a sleek, darting predator, but a tough, methodical beast designed to absorb punishment and deliver a killing blow with unparalleled precision. He called his internal project the Kraken, a mythical sea monster known for its sheer, uncompromising power. The official designation, once it received Navy attention, would become the XTB-2F1. From the outset, the Kraken was an anomaly. While other designers focused on streamlining, Thorne insisted on a triple redundant hydraulic system, each line armored and rooted independently. The fuselage, rather than being a single continuous structure, was designed with segmented, load-bearing frames that could localize damage. Its engine, a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp, was not merely bolted on, but integrated into a heavily armored nacelle, complete with self-sealing fuel tanks that were themselves encased in a secondary fire-retardant bladder system. This meant more weight, more plumbing, more wiring, and infinitely more complexity. "Elias, this is a flying fortress, not a torpedo bomber," snapped Admiral Harrison Vance during an early design review, his brow furrowed over Thorne's blueprints. "The weight alone will cripple its range and speed. And look at this torpedo bay. A motorized, fully enclosed system? Why not simply a bomb rack?" Thorne, unperturbed, adjusted his spectacles. "Admiral, a torpedo dropped from an external rack incurs drag, reduces speed, and subjects the weapon to turbulent air, affecting its trajectory. An internal bay, while requiring a complex deployment mechanism, ensures the torpedo is released in a stable, controlled environment, increasing accuracy. Furthermore, it allows for greater speed during approach, as the drag profile is cleaner. As for weight, the survivability offered by the armor and redundant systems will ensure more aircraft return, and more torpedoes reach their target. A plane that doesn't return, no matter how fast, is useless." Vance merely grunted, unconvinced. The prevailing wisdom favored simpler, faster aircraft, easier to build, easier to maintain. Thorne's Kraken seemed to defy every conventional tenet of aircraft design. Its wings, for instance, featured an intricate hydraulic folding mechanism that allowed them to retract not just upwards, but also slightly inwards, reducing the aircraft's footprint on crowded carrier decks by an unprecedented margin. But adding dozens of pounds of actuators and lines, prototype construction began in late 1940, a meticulous, slow process. Each component, from the armored pilot's seat to the complex bomb aimers and defensive gun turrets, seemed to be engineered with an obsessive attention to detail that frustrated assembly line workers. The rear gunner's position, for example, was not just a simple flexible mount. It was a semi-enclosed, hydraulically assisted turret with a wide field of fire, protected by thick plating. The forward-firing guns were not merely fixed. They were designed to be remotely sighted and fired by the pilot via an early rudimentary electronic aiming system. Intended to improve convergence at various ranges, early reports from the factory floor were scathing. "It's a mechanic's nightmare," one foreman exclaimed. "Every rivet, every line, every gear seems to have a backup, and each backup has its own maintenance schedule." Pilots assigned to test the XTB-2F1 prototype echoed similar sentiments. "She's a tank," reported Lieutenant Commander David "Davy" Jones, one of Grumman's most experienced test pilots. "Flies like a brick, and her systems are more temperamental than a prima donna. The engine management alone requires a dedicated engineering degree." Yet even Jones, a man who appreciated raw speed, admitted a grudging respect for the Kraken's resilience. During a simulated dive, a minor hydraulic line burst, a scenario that would have crippled many other aircraft. The Kraken's secondary system seamlessly took over, allowing Jones to land without incident. This moment, small as it was, hinted at the true, hidden potential of Thorne's overcomplicated design. The beast was slow, it was heavy, it was a nightmare to maintain, but it was incredibly, almost unnervingly, difficult to kill. The XTB-2F1 Kraken, despite its initial operational hurdles, gained a reprieve. The war in the Pacific was escalating, and the Navy desperately needed torpedo bombers. The initial production models, designated TB-2F1, began rolling off the assembly lines in late 1942, a full year behind schedule. A delay largely attributed to the sheer complexity of Thorne's design. The factory floor was a hive of activity, but also a crucible of frustration. Workers, accustomed to the simpler, more forgiving Grumman designs, grappled with the Kraken's dense internal architecture. Every access panel revealed a labyrinth of wires, pipes, and control rods, each meticulously labeled, but requiring specialized tools and training to service. The heart of the Kraken was its colossal R2800 engine, a beast of an engine that, when running optimally, provided immense power. But Thorne's insistence on a highly advanced, multi-stage supercharger and a complex fuel injection system meant it was temperamental. Field maintenance crews would come to curse its sensitive magneto timing and the intricate fuel filters that clogged with alarming frequency in the humid, salt-laden air of the Pacific. "She's got the power of a locomotive," a veteran mechanic once grumbled, wiping grease from his brow, "but the disposition of a spoiled child." Defensive armament was equally formidable and complex. Beyond the standard forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns, the Kraken boasted a power-operated dorsal turret for the gunner, housing twin 50s and a unique ventral .30 caliber machine gun, operated by the Radioman bombardier, offering protection from below. Each turret had its own hydraulic system, electrical circuits, and ammunition feed, creating a dense network of components that often fouled or jammed if not meticulously maintained. The pilot's cockpit, a veritable armored capsule, was another Thorne innovation, constructed of multiple layers of hardened steel and duralumin, capable of shrugging off smaller, caliber rounds that would shred other aircraft. Training for the Kraken crews was an arduous affair. Pilots accustomed to the nimble Dauntless or the stable Avenger found the Kraken's ponderous weight and less responsive controls a challenge. Its takeoff and landing characteristics, particularly on a pitching carrier deck, demanded exceptional skill. The advanced torpedo aiming system, a gyroscopic marvel that calculated lead and drop points based on target speed, range, and aircraft altitude, required hours of simulator training. "It's like flying a library," complained Ensign Thomas "Tommy" Miller, a fresh-faced pilot. So many gauges, so many levers, so many things to go wrong. Ground crews faced an even steeper learning curve. The detailed maintenance manuals, often thicker than a telephone book, became their nightly reading. Specialized tools, unique to the Kraken, had to be fabricated or ordered, causing further logistical headaches. The triple redundant hydraulic system, while a lifesaver in combat, meant triple the points of potential leakage or failure during routine operations. "You fix one leak, two more spring up," a chief petty officer lamented. "It's like fighting a hydra." Despite the grumbling, there was an underlying respect for the Kraken's sheer robustness. During test flights, it was common for aircraft to return riddled with simulated bullet holes, yet still fully controllable. The armored fuel tanks, though heavy, proved remarkably resistant to rupture. The segmented fuselage, Thorne's pet project, often localized damage, preventing a single hit from compromising the entire airframe. These attributes, however, were not enough to quell the widespread skepticism. Many commanders viewed the TB2F1 as an engineering folly and expensive. High-maintenance aircraft that would prove more trouble than it was worth in the unforgiving crucible of combat. Admiral Chester Nimitz, ever pragmatic, watched the reports with a calculating eye. He understood the need for reliable torpedo bombers. And while the Kraken's complexity was a concern, its theoretical survivability was an attractive counterpoint to the high attrition rates suffered by other aircraft. He authorized the formation of two experimental squadrons, VT-18 and VT-19, to deploy the Kraken into the Pacific. Their mission was clear: prove the aircraft's worth, or consign Thorne's overcomplicated masterpiece to the scrapyard, the crews of VT-18 and VT-19. Many of them green, others hardened veterans, approached their new mounts with a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity. They knew the reputation. The Kraken was a beast. A slow, demanding, temperamental beast. But as they climbed into its heavily armored cockpit, felt the solid thrum of its powerful engine, and saw the sheer array of defensive armament, a different sentiment began to take root. This wasn't a sleek hunter. It was a defiant brawler. And in the brutal, unforgiving skies of the Pacific, sometimes, a brawler was exactly what was needed. The maiden deployment of the TB2F1 Kraken squadrons, VT-18 and VT-19, aboard the USS Saratoga in early 1943, was fraught with tension. The carrier's deck crews, already struggling with the sheer bulk of the new aircraft, found its complex wing-folding mechanism and precise fueling requirements a constant source of frustration. The flight deck echoed with the groans of hydraulics and the curses of frustrated mechanics. Initial missions were less about combat and more about survival against the Kraken's own internal demons. Engine failures were frequent, often due to clogged fuel lines or overheating superchargers. Hydraulic leaks became an almost daily occurrence, staining the gray deck with telltale streaks of oil. Several aircraft were lost not to enemy fire, but to training accidents, pilots struggling with the Kraken's heavy handling characteristics during carrier landings or suffering engine cutouts on approach. The early attrition rate was alarming, reinforcing the perception that Thorne's design was simply too complex for the rigors of naval aviation. Lieutenant Commander Jack "Grim" Reardon, commander of VT-18, was a man hardened by Midway. He had seen good men die in flimsy aircraft, and he harbored a deep skepticism for the Kraken. "It's a mechanic's trophy," he'd often snarl, "not a pilot's weapon." Yet, even Reardon couldn't deny the aircraft's sheer presence. When a Kraken took off, it didn't just fly. It lumbered into the sky, a defiant, roaring testament to brute force. The true test came during a search and strike mission against a reported Japanese convoy west of Bougainville. 6 Krakens from VT-18, escorted by a handful of F-4F Wildcats, were vectored towards the target. The weather was abysmal. low clouds, driving rain, and a choppy sea. Conditions that would have grounded lesser aircraft, but the Kraken, with its powerful engines and robust airframe, pressed on. Its radar operator diligently sweeping the storm-lashed waters as they found the convoy, 3 merchant ships, protected by a destroyer. The Japanese Zeros, scrambling from a nearby island airfield, were quick to respond. The escorting Wildcats immediately engaged, drawing away the bulk of the enemy fighters. But 2 Zeros, sleek and deadly, broke through, targeting the lead Kraken, piloted by Ensign Miller. Tracers ripped through the Kraken's tail, striking the dorsal turret. Gunner Petty Officer First Class Frank Fixer Davis, a man whose nickname came from his ability to improvise repairs mid-flight, returned fire. His twin 50s spitting flame. Miller felt the shudder as rounds impacted the fuselage. The Kraken, however, absorbed the hits with surprising resilience. The heavy armor around the pilot's cockpit deflected rounds that would have penetrated a Hellcat. The self-sealing fuel tanks, Thorne's overcomplicated marvel, performed as designed, preventing catastrophic fires. Davis, despite a minor wound, kept firing, forcing 1 Zero to break off. The other, pressing its attack, managed to riddle the Kraken's port wing. A hydraulic line for the flaps was severed, but the secondary system, though sluggish, engaged. Miller wrestled with the controls, keeping the heavy bomber on an even keel. Then came the moment of truth. Miller, having evaded the Zeros, lined up his attack run on the lead merchant ship. The advanced torpedo aiming system, despite the battle damage, remained functional. Miller meticulously input the data, his hands steady on the yoke. The Kraken plunged through the flak-filled sky, its internal torpedo bay humming as the mechanism prepared for release. At the optimal moment, the torpedo dropped cleanly, slicing through the waves towards its target. A geyser of water erupted as the Mark 13 found its mark, and the merchant ship listed violently, smoke billowing. As Miller pulled away. The remaining Zero made one last desperate pass, raking the Kraken's underside. The radio man bombardier, Petty Officer Second Class, Kenji Kenny Tanaka, fired his ventral .30, a rarely used weapon, but in this instance, perfectly positioned. The Zero, caught off guard, sustained critical hits and plummeted into the sea. Miller's Kraken, battered but not broken, limped back to the Saratoga. Its fuselage was a patchwork of holes, its port wing trailing smoke, but it had returned. And it had sunk a ship. The after-action report, detailing the extensive damage the Kraken had sustained and survived, sent ripples through the command structure. It highlighted not just the crew's bravery, but the aircraft's unprecedented ability to absorb punishment. Reardon, though still grim, found himself looking at the damaged Kraken with new eyes. Perhaps, he conceded, a rare hint of approval in his voice, Thorne might have been onto something. The beast was proving its worth, one impossible mission at a time. The incident involving Ensign Miller's battered TB2F1 Kraken and the subsequent sinking of the Japanese merchant ship marked a subtle but significant turning point. The initial skepticism surrounding Thorne's overcomplicated design began to erode, replaced by a grudging respect, and then by a growing recognition of its unique capabilities. The Kraken, with its unparalleled survivability and precise torpedo delivery, was not just enduring combat. It was excelling. By mid-1943, VT-18 and VT-19 were regularly flying missions from the Saratoga, targeting Japanese shipping and coastal installations. Their kill ratio, measured not by aerial victories, but by successful attacks on hardened targets and, crucially, by the percentage of aircraft returning from hazardous sorties, began to climb dramatically. While other torpedo bombers were frequently lost to flak or fighter attacks, the Krakens, though often returning looking like flying sieves, consistently made it back to the carrier. Lieutenant Commander Reardon, initially a staunch critic, became one of the Kraken's fiercest advocates. He began to develop new tactics, exploiting its strengths. He realized that the Kraken, while slow, could absorb enough punishment to press home an attack where other planes would be forced to break off. Its armored cockpit and redundant controls meant that even if the pilot was wounded or a primary system failed, there was a higher chance of completing the mission and returning. He encouraged his pilots to hold their attack runs longer, trusting the aircraft's resilience. Knowing that the advanced aiming system would deliver the torpedo with devastating accuracy. One particularly harrowing mission involved a strike against a heavily defended Japanese anchorage in the Truk Lagoon. 8 Krakens, accompanied by a full complement of Hellcat fighters, flew deep into enemy territory. The air over Truk was thick with anti-aircraft fire, and Japanese Zeros swarmed from every direction. Lieutenant Hotshot Henry Wallace, flying Kraken Black 7, found himself isolated, his Hellcat escorts drawn away by a larger engagement. 3 Zeros descended upon him, their cannons spitting fire. Wallace felt the familiar jolts as rounds hammered into the Kraken's fuselage. His instrument panel flickered as electrical lines were severed, but the robust secondary power bus kicked in. The dorsal gunner, Sergeant Mike Iron Murphy, a former machinist, coolly rotated his turret, engaging the pursuing fighters. His twin 50s chattered, their tracers finding purchase in a Zero's wing route, sending it spiraling into the sea. Another Zero, trying to come in from below, was met by radioman Petty Officer First Class Clara Sparky Thompson, who, with surprising accuracy, peppered its underside with her ventral .30 caliber machine gun, forcing it to disengage, trailing smoke. Meanwhile, Wallace pressed his attack. The target was a large supply ship, bristling with defensive guns. Flak burst all around him, shaking the heavy aircraft violently. A direct hit tore a gaping hole in his port wing, disabling one of the landing gear mechanisms. But the Kraken, though wounded, held its course. The gyroscopic torpedo sight, though its display was flickering, still provided a lock. Wallace pickled the torpedo, feeling the familiar thud as the Mark 13 left the internal bay. Moments later, a tremendous explosion rocked the anchorage as the supply ship's magazines detonated. Wallace, with a crippled wing and a damaged engine, nursed Black 7 out of the inferno. The journey back was agonizingly slow, but the Kraken's robust construction held. The triple redundant hydraulic system, though leaking profusely, allowed him to maintain control. He landed on the Saratoga with a single wheel, sparks flying, but he landed. And he brought back his crew. After-action analysis consistently showed that the TB2F1 Krakens were returning from missions with damage that would have been fatal to any other aircraft. The heavy armor, the segmented fuselage, the self-sealing fuel tanks, and especially the multi-redundant systems, were proving their worth. The overcomplicated features, once derided, were now celebrated. They weren't just luxuries. They were lifesavers, directly contributing to mission success and crew survival. The kill ratio wasn't about shooting down more enemy fighters, though the Kraken's gunners certainly accounted for their share. It was about more Krakens returning to fight another day. And more crucially, more torpedoes and bombs reaching their targets. Elias Thorne's design, initially a pariah, had become an unlikely hero. The crews who flew the Kraken, once apprehensive, now spoke of their demanding machines with a fierce loyalty. They understood its quirks, respected its resilience, and trusted it with their lives. The Kraken was a brute, yes, but it was their brute, and it was winning the war, one impossible mission at a time. As the war in the Pacific ground relentlessly towards its conclusion in 1944 and early 1945, the TB2F1 Kraken continued to serve, a steadfast workhorse in the increasingly sophisticated arsenal of the U.S. Navy. Its reputation as an almost indestructible attack platform was firmly cemented. Commanders, once hesitant, now clamored for Kroken squadrons, recognizing that while slower than newer designs, its ability to absorb punishment and deliver its payload with precision translated directly into sustained operational capability and decisive strikes against heavily defended targets. Yet, the fundamental challenges of Thorne's design never truly vanished. The overcomplicated label, though now tinged with respect, still held true. Maintenance remained a Herculean task. Each Kroken required significantly more man-hours of ground crew attention than any other aircraft in the fleet. The specialized tools, the intricate procedures for servicing its multiple redundant systems, and the constant battle against corrosion in its densely packed airframe meant that squadrons often had fewer operational aircraft at any given time. Despite the high survival rate of individual planes, parts commonality with other aircraft was minimal, creating logistical nightmares across the vast Pacific theater. Dr. Elias Thorne, now a venerated, if still somewhat eccentric, figure within Grumman, watched his creation's wartime service with a quiet satisfaction. He had always believed in the philosophy of engineered resilience, even at the cost of simplicity. He understood the criticisms, but the casualty figures and the mounting tally of sunken Japanese ships spoke for themselves. The Kroken had proven that sometimes the most complex solution could be the most effective, particularly when human lives hung in the balance. As the war drew to a close, and the focus shifted towards the jet age, the Kroken's operational life began to wane. Newer, faster and simpler torpedo bombers, like the Skyraider, were already on the drawing board, promising greater speed and easier maintenance. The advent of jet propulsion would soon render all propeller-driven combat aircraft obsolete. The Kroken, a product of a specific brutal era of piston engine warfare, would not transition into the post-war era of sleek, supersonic designs. The final operational sortie of a TB2 F1 Kroken took place shortly after VJ Day, a reconnaissance flight over a demilitarized Japanese island. It was a quiet end for a machine that had roared through some of the most intense battles of the war. Many Krokens were simply scrapped, their complex internal mechanisms deemed too expensive and difficult to maintain for peacetime service. A few found their way into training units, where their ruggedness made them ideal for demanding student pilots. Before they too were retired, the legacy of the TB2 F1 Kroken, however, extended far beyond its physical presence. It was a testament to the interplay of innovation, improvisation, and the sheer grit of the crews who flew it. It proved that a designer's unconventional vision, even when deemed overcomplicated, could yield superior results under the most extreme conditions. The insights gained from the Kroken's multi-redundant systems, advanced armor, and integrated weapon delivery would influence future aircraft design, leading to more resilient and survivable combat platforms. The pilots and crews who flew the Kroken carried its stories for a lifetime. They remembered the demanding controls, the endless maintenance, but most vividly, they remembered the feeling of returning to the carrier, their heavy bird riddled with holes, but still flying. They remembered the roar of its powerful engine, the shudder of its frame under enemy fire, and the unwavering confidence it instilled in them, knowing that Thorne's beast would bring them home. It was a demanding partner, but an utterly reliable one. Dr. Elias Thorne, long after his retirement, would often be asked about the Kroken. He would simply smile, adjust his spectacles, and say, sometimes to survive the simplest of tasks, one must be prepared for the most complicated of challenges. The Kroken, the overcomplicated torpedo bomber with the highest kill ratio for its mission profile, was a powerful, if ponderous, symbol of that truth. Its roar faded into history, but its impact on naval aviation, and the memories of the brave souls who flew it, endured, a quiet testament to a maverick's vision and a machine's defiant spirit.